All right, let's dive right into this explainer and crack open your case file for the next 13 weeks of modern world history. Today, we're zeroing in on a really crucial mini project, source analysis. You see, you aren't just going to be sitting there memorizing dates and names. No way. You are going to be acting as historical detectives. We're taking the exact skills from your English language arts standards and applying them directly to the dramatic, incredibly high-stakes events of the modern era. So grab your magnifying glass because it's time to learn how to interrogate history itself. Here's how we're laying out today's investigation. We'll start with Welcome to Modern Times, move into Conflict and Global Connection, unpack the Historian's Toolkit, dive into analyzing historical evidence, look at comparing different perspectives, and finally wrap up with connecting past to present. Section 1. Welcome to Modern Times, opening the case file. So this 13-week unit is totally defined by rapid change, intense global action, and these really profound shifts in how societies across the world interact with one another. Unlike the Middle Ages unit you just wrapped up, which looked a lot at regional systems of power, this unit is all about the entire globe becoming deeply intertwined, which actually leads us to our ultimate mystery. How did conflict and connection shape the modern world? Over the next few months, every single primary source you read, every map you study, and every document you analyze is essentially a clue. And they're all meant to help you answer this very specific question. You're going to evaluate how nations fighting each other, while simultaneously becoming way more economically and culturally connected, literally forge the world we live in today.
Section 2. Conflict and Global Connection. The Stakes.
Let's look at this high-speed sweep of the major global events you'll be investigating. We kick things off in the late 1800s with the rise of imperialism and nationalism, ideologies that really pushed nations to expand and fiercely compete. That tension eventually explodes into World War I from 1914 to 1918, which is quickly followed by the devastating, unprecedented global scale of World War II from 1939 to 1945. And then the era shifts right into the Cold War, a period of massive ideological standoff that lasted all the way until 1991. When you're analyzing sources in this unit, they're going to be pulled directly from these incredibly turbulent times. Section 3. The Historian's Toolkit, Gathering the Skills. You know, a good detective never just guesses. They rely on hard textual evidence to back up their theories. When you're reading a historical document, whether it's, say, a treaty from World War I or a speech from the Cold War, you are hunting for specific facts, details, or quotes that prove a claim. You can't just casually say, oh, the Cold War was tense. You actually have to pull the exact quote from a primary source that demonstrates that tension. To effectively evaluate historical arguments, you're going to follow 3 exact steps, derived straight from your literacy expectations. First up, you read closely to determine the central idea. Like, what is this text actually about? Second, you look for the author's purpose. Why in the world was this written? And who was the intended audience? And finally, step 3, you cite specific evidence to support your conclusions. This right here is the absolute foundation of evidence-based reasoning in social studies. Section 4. Analyzing historical evidence, interrogating the text. Now, according to your grade 7 literacy standards for reading, you have to do a lot more than just read the words. You have to draw logical inferences and find the proof. Let's break that down a bit. Explicitly means what the text states right there on the page, clear as day. But inferences? Well, that's where your detective skills really shine. That means reading between the lines. For instance, if a World War II leader gives a speech saying their country's factories are producing more than ever, the explicit text is just about factory production. But the inference you might draw is that they're secretly preparing for a long, drawn-out conflict and trying to boost national morale. You then have to cite several pieces of evidence to prove that inference is actually correct. Ultimately, instead of getting bogged down in dense academic jargon, we are going to focus heavily on fact-checking claims and interrogating our sources. If a textbook or a famous historical figure makes a really broad statement about a conflict, your job is to translate that standard into action. You find the source, check the facts, read between the lines, and bring the receipts. Section 5. Comparing different perspectives, identifying the bias. Any good investigator will tell you eyewitnesses to an event don't always agree. The exact same thing is true for history. You'll need to expertly compare first-hand accounts against second-hand accounts. A first-hand account is your primary source, maybe a gritty journal entry from a soldier sitting in the trenches of World War I. A second-hand account is a secondary source, like a modern historian writing about that exact same battle, say 50 years later. They both offer really valuable information, but they have completely different focuses, different limitations, and different biases.
Your job is to describe the differences in their focus and the actual information they provide.
Let's look at a worked example to see how this plays out. Imagine you encounter a bold claim like this in a historical source from the late 1800s. Imperialism brought progress and civilization to all. Now, if you encounter a sweeping statement like this, your job isn't to just blindly accept it. And as a historical investigator, your job also isn't to take a political side. Your job is to impartially analyze the claim using the evidence. So how exactly do we test a claim like this? You're going to use this exact checklist to verify or challenge historical claims completely neutrally, making sure to look at evidence from all sides of the conflict. First, check the source's background. Who wrote that quote? Was it a leader of an imperial power? Because if so, their motive might just be to justify their expansion. Second, find corroborating evidence. Do other texts actually support this? Third, look for bias or missing information. What is the author conveniently leaving out? And finally, compare it with opposing viewpoints. You simply cannot evaluate a claim about imperialism without reading first-hand accounts from the populations who were actually colonized. Only by synthesizing multiple, conflicting perspectives can you build a true, well-rounded historical analysis.
Section 6. Connecting Past to Present. The Final Resolution.
So what are the ultimate student outcomes here for Grade 7 Modern World History? Well, by the end of this 13-week unit, you'll be able to analyze the deep mechanics of global conflict. You'll be able to clearly explain massive concepts like imperialism and nationalism. You will have totally mastered the skill of comparing differing historical perspectives. And, probably most importantly, you'll use those skills to connect past events directly to current global issues. The modern world didn't just magically appear out of nowhere. It was built by the exact connections and conflicts you're about to study. As you jump into this 13-week journey, keep your eyes wide open and your toolkit ready. Because when you read the news today, you are literally seeing the direct aftermath of the late 1800s, the World Wars, and the Cold War. You now have the skills to trace those threads backwards. The case file is open, the evidence is waiting, and the mystery of the modern world is officially yours to solve. When you look at the headlines today, what historical clues will you uncover?